Entering the Pat Mayo Experience.
Pat Mayo Experience. Pat Mayo Experience. Pat Mayo Experience. Experience.
Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, NFL Division Previews presented by Underdog Fantasy. Code Mayo at Underdog Fantasy right now will get you a deposit bonus of up to $250. Take advantage of it. Best ball draft, season-long pick'em, and then my favorite, the in-game pick'em week to week is going to be awesome this year. So get it going. Underdog Fantasy. Use code Mayo. If you want to make projections and make your own fantasy rankings, or even try to game the system and try to find some great props for yourself, use Run the Sims. It's completely free right now. So runthesims.com, create a free account with an email address, and boom, you're off to the races. Code Mayo will get you 10% off the gambling package, the DFS package, the Sims package. But if you just want free, runthesims.com. That's where it's at, all right? Jake Seeley from theathletic.com on the line to break down the NFC East. This is the final leg of our division previews. I'd say we saved the best for last, but the Eagles are favored in this division a lot. If you want the rest of the division previews, just hit the description. Mayo Media Network on YouTube, Pat Mayo Experience audio podcast. But the Eagles are minus 110 to win this division. They look bad in the final 2 months last year. I think Jalen Hurts was hurt.
I think a lot of things were an issue late in that season, but that would definitely be one of them. The schedule didn't help. I mean, San Francisco, Dallas in division on the road, at Seattle on the road, Arizona and the Giants, but the Giants, you got the one road game there as well. Something looked wrong. Whether or not Jalen Hurts was the injury, the offense wasn't clicking. I think they maybe were trying a little too much. How many times did we sit here with the whole pass-run situation? It just looked off.
It did. I think that Hurts is going to be an amazing fantasy asset once again. I don't think that's like shocking to anyone, but there does seem to be a fear that the tush push is going to be over because Jason Kelce isn't there anymore. I still think they're going to do it.
I'm not even that concerned with it. I do think they're still going to do it. Why wouldn't they? Like, it's not like Jason Kelce was the only reason that worked. I mean, a lot of it had to do with Hurts. Now, yes, Kelce, arguably one of the best centers we've seen in forever. I mean, instant Hall of Famer. But I think that you have Jalen Hurts, you have somebody who can play center, and they're going to do it again. The guards are going to get involved too. But I don't see why they get away from it. My biggest thing, and I'm sure we're going to talk about it, has to do with the Kellen Moore situation.
So explain the Kellen Moore situation to me. Now brought in as an offensive coordinator. Their win total is also 10.5, and that is being bet slightly to the over at minus 130. So people are in on the Eagles as the division favorites. And I think that a lot of people feel like the rest of the division is down, like Dallas got worse. So that just helps out Philly within the division a lot. But with Kellen Moore, we expect more motion to be run, and you think that benefits Devonta Smith more than A.J. Brown.
I think it definitively can. So something we know, and this comes from Dwayne McFarland, who sent me down this rabbit hole. He tweeted out and said that pre-snap motion increases fantasy production for wide receivers by 50%. And it was in his article. I actually tagged the article in my article about a bunch of stats that do matter for wide receivers in fantasy, and that was one of them. And I went down this rabbit hole because it has a lot to do with offensive coordinators, coaching changes, and teams like that. And Kellen Moore was one of the biggest. He actually, and I pulled my article up for this, 58.4% in his run, and especially last year with the Chargers and pre-snap motion. The Eagles, until over this same course, 27.6. They're the second largest jump from previous coordinator to new coordinator. The biggest jump is actually the Saints, going from 22.5 to 67%. Almost a 200% difference, percentage jump like that. But you look at what Kellen Moore can do in using that. We know what it does by the stat that Dwayne gave, what it can do for Jalen Hurts. But the biggest thing is who's going to benefit wide receiver more. They're going to do it more with Devonta Smith, with his ability, with his actually pre-snap motion usage already just not being to this level. So there is a world where I'm not saying I don't want A.J. Brown. I have A.J. Brown as a top 10 wide receiver. I just think there's a non-zero chance that Devonta Smith kind of puts that late season run we saw 2 years ago on. And in that late season run, Devonta Smith was pushing slightly ahead of A.J. Brown. All that being said is that I think Devonta Smith is a great value where he's going, even though he's being drafted as a wide receiver too. I think there's a world where he kind of comes neck and neck and maybe shockingly to most even outscores A.J. Brown.
Devonta Smith is going at pick number 43 in season-long redraft leagues. A.J. Brown is going at number 9. Based on that value, you'd rather have Devonta Smith and maybe take Puka or Jamar Chase with that pick where you would have to take A.J. Brown. But Devonta Smith, the guys going around him, Cooper Kupp, Malik Neighbors, Zay Flowers, DJ Moore, DK Metcalf, Jalen Waddle, Of all the twos, perceived twos at least, in football, is Devonta Smith the highest on your list?
I believe he is. I'll double check.
Like, do you
just
like
to make
do you,
sure
do
as
you
we're-
like him more than Waddle?
Yes.
Do you like him more than Diggs or Nico Collins?
Yes, yeah, not more than Nico. I actually think Nico. That wouldn't shock me. We had that conversation on the show. I like Nico more. I think they're neck and neck. I like Nico slightly more, but it wouldn't shock me with that one. You brought that up. Like, what if Diggs is the number one and Nico takes a step back? I think it's still Nico, but it's slightly. I have Nico just barely in front of him. Actually, I lied. There is
Debo.
one number two that I do like. Debo.
Yeah. And this is presuming Ayuk ends up staying in San Francisco, which I really do think that he is going to do. But, things
Yes.
change all the time in the NFL. It's getting pretty close to the season to start making trades. But yeah, I like Devonta Smith as well. Like,
Do you like him more than Cooper Kupp?
yeah, I think so. It's not that I'm out on Cooper Kupp. It's just he's going a slightly too high for me.
It's funny that, like, is he going slightly too high though with what he finished when they were running? I guess in all the games where you see is like 30%, and they were neck and neck, that being he and Nakua. Like, the numbers were there that Cooper Kupp arguably should be like a fringe wide receiver one, arguably.
Yeah, I mean, I
It's
can see
tough.
it.
I feel like Kupp is either going to win some people early part of your draft, win some people some potential leagues as a factor helping you win, or he's going to be a pick that, like, man, I can't believe I took one more chance on Cooper Kupp. Like, I don't feel there's a middle ground.
Is there any other receiver you care about on the Eagles? Like Paris Campbell, who might be playing the slot for them. Are you in on Dallas Goedert?
Yes,
Okay.
I actually do think. I think Dallas Goedert can get back to what we saw. Was it 2 or 3 years ago where Dallas Goedert was in that 800 range? I think Dallas Goedert is still a problem. When I look at this team, I'm looking for the third option, who's pretty much been irrelevant, and part of it, unfortunately, has hurt Dallas Goedert. But there's just such a funnel between A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith with some of this pre-snap motion baked in, as in also helping Dallas Goedert. You can run Dallas Goedert on some of it. It actually helps tight ends as well, not surprisingly. But I think that if you got Dallas Goedert back into that 17, 18% target share range, I mean, even worst case, 16-ish, 15, just being the clear number 3, because you brought it up. Paris Campbell, fine, whatever. Like, just to look down this depth chart, there's a bunch of dudes. There's nobody that I really think that should, on the field, contend with Goddard. So if you get Goddard back to 90, maybe best case scenario 100 targets, but 90 targets, I think that he's in play. I'd take him in front of Njoku, who we both hate.
This is true. And Njoku's going at pick number 93. Goddard's going at pick number 109. That is behind TJ Hawkinson, who might be out 10 weeks.
I'd still take Dallas Goedert, yeah, over Hawkinson.
Yeah. Would you take him over Brock Bowers?
Yes.
Jake Ferguson? No. For
No.
Me, by the way. We'll get to Ferguson
No.
in a second. Evan Ingram?
No.
Yeah. Okay. So he's like number 9 then. Ish.
Yeah.
But he should be included in that tier of tight ends you can draft and start week 1.
He's number 10, to give you the exact number.
There we are. Let's talk about your dog's namesake. I haven't seen Barkley pop up at any point, but Saquon is now the running back for Philadelphia, and he is being drafted like he is Saquon Barkley, elite guy, pick number 11 overall in season-long fantasy drafts. I have him projected out as number 8. What's the range here for Barkley? Like, could he be running back 1? Hey, there's Barkley. Hey, Barkley.
Yep. You ask, you shall be given.
He must have heard his name, or she must have heard her name.
Yeah, I waved her over.
Like, do you
I
think,
think,
is there potential for Barkley to be running back number 2 behind McCaffrey, or is it just most likely that he finishes
Yes.
in the Derrick Henry range?
No, I actually think he has that potential. If you told me, because the 49ers, there's been rumors, I don't believe them. We hear this all the time. To go back to the Travis Etienne's going to see a lesser workload, that they might scale off Christian McCaffrey a little bit this year. Yeah, scale off from the best player, best running back that we've seen for some time. Let's do that, see that works. It's not going to happen. I'm just saying, if there was a world, like, I think Barkley has this situation now to be in contention, to contend for the number 1 spot with Kyron Williams of last year. Kyron Williams, if we saw that again, kind of like that kind of run. Because I know we've already seen Will Shipley getting touches with their ones and Kenneth Gaylor. That's how they evaluate running backs. Do you really think they signed Barkley and brought him in and gave him all that money and the talent that Barkley is, they're going to be like, yeah, let's give touches to Shipley and Gainwell again? No. They're going to use him like a bell cow. We've seen him as a bell cow. And the reason I brought up Christian McCaffrey is because you go back to the rookie season and he edged out McCaffrey 0.1, very, very slim margin, but 0.1 fantasy points per game. He had better. So he has that ability. And you put him on this team with the Eagles and now Kellen Moore being able to use him, I think it's the range of outcomes. I don't have him at number 2, but I have him inside the top 5. Actually, he's number 4. I think he's in that same conversation just because Hurts might steal a few touchdowns. And I think that's the only downside is that I think the rushing touchdowns might be stilted a little bit because of Jalen Hurts.
He, again, pick number 11, that's running back number 4 in season-long drafts. Picks 11, 12, and 13 are all running backs. It's Saquon, Gibbs, and then Taylor. Is that the order you would have them in?
I would actually give the lean to Taylor. We talked about it on that show. Mostly because of workload and the rushing touchdowns, I do think go to him. I think Anthony Richardson is going to have plenty of rushing touchdowns of his own, but I think it'll be a little bit more of like Anthony Richardson not at the 2-yard line. It'll be Jonathan Taylor. It'll be Anthony Richardson maybe from the 10. So that's the slight difference is that Hurts will push that in, the tush push. He will even do it from the 2 and the 1. That's the only slim concern. I have more rushing touchdowns for Jonathan Taylor than I do for Saquon Barkley. Obviously, I have Barkley in the passing game, but it's not as great as it might have been at his peak for the Giants because, to go back to A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, I just don't think there's enough share similar to where the Giants, where Saquon Barkley could be their second leading receiver in receptions.
Let's move to Dallas. They bring back Zeke. Their win total is 10.5, and everyone is betting the under, minus 180
Wow.
to bet under 10.5, plus 150 to bet the over for the Dallas Cowboys this season. They are plus 155 to win the division, so they're still expected to be good, just not as good as Philadelphia. And just to take a look at what their depth chart is up to, CeeDee Lamb is going as pick number 2 overall right now? Yeah, pick number 2, wide receiver 1 off the board. And then it's tough. Like Dak is being drafted as like a fringe top 10 guy. Cooks is way down the list when we take a look at it. Yeah, Brendan Cooks is pick number 151, wide receiver 63. Jake Ferguson's a fringe top 10 tight end. Like the running backs, no one really knows what's going on between Zeke and Rico Dwaddle and how that's going to shake out. It just seems like there's CeeDee Lamb and then there's everyone else on the Cowboys from a fantasy perspective. But that doesn't make any sense. Like it's not going to be.
It doesn't.
It's not going to be a 70% target share for CeeDee Lamb. I get that he's going to be great. Someone else on this team is going to be awesome, and they're all values right now. I like Brendan Cooks of that bunch.
I don't. I like Jake Ferguson, and I think this team is going to be pretty similar to what you saw last year, where Brandon Cooks didn't even have 100 targets. And I know he didn't play a game, but even so, did he have 90? I just don't think Brandon Cooks is a factor anymore. I think Brandon Cooks is fine for DFS matchup plays because there's going to be those weeks where he scores a touchdown, maybe even 2, because he had 7, 8, 9, somewhere around there touchdowns. I think Brandon Cooks is valuable in that facet, but I just don't even think he's Brandon Cooks from 3 years ago.
You know what?
I'm just going to go for Jake Ferguson.
From week 10 on, he was actually pretty consistent in terms of how involved he was in this offense. So, yeah, he had like 4 targets, and he didn't play a game. Then 7 targets, 4, 4, 4, 4, 2. And then they played the Giants 10, 4, 5, 4, 5, 6, 2, 8, 8 to end the year. Like, that's not bad.
That's not bad at the final stretch. The 4s don't really do a whole lot for me. That final stretch, sure. I'm in on Dak. I'm in on CeeDee Lamb. We've had the Dak conversation on other shows. But I'm going back to, I think Jake Ferguson already was the number 2 last year. I think he takes another step forward where, like some of the teams we talk about, not Mark Andrews and Travis Kelce because they're conceivably the ones, but at least a Trey McBride. And, we're going down that road of like, they're the number 2, not a wide receiver.
I like McBride better. But I think after that, Dalton Kincaid is currently going 40 spots ahead of Jake Ferguson. I think they're very comparable.
I do too. I think Jake Ferguson should be in the conversation with Evan Ingram. Not that target percentage, not that high of targets that we just saw Evan Ingram with last year, mostly because Jake Ferguson will do more on a per catch and potentially a few more touchdowns. But is there a big gap? There's a slight one, but I'm with you. Is like Kincaid, Ferguson, all those names. We mentioned it already. I would take him in front of Goddard. I will take Jake Ferguson at tight end a hell of a lot this year. I still think there's going to be plenty of passes going to the backfield. Zeke is still a good pass catcher. Not great. He's not exceptional, but he's still good enough. Dowdle's good enough. If Deuce Vaughn stays healthy, maybe he gets in the mix. I think it is. I think it's going to be CeeDee Lamb around 30%. just like we saw last year, Ferguson gets his 100, 105, 110 maybe. I mean, I honestly would be shocked if he pushes into the teens. And then in that case, it's just 80 more again for Cooks. And I'm not even that concerned about the Tolbert news of like, oh, this is the year that he's going to step forward. Or Flournoy, that they like, oh, that was a sneaky get with Florida. Like, I just don't think that Cooks is valuable because he's the third, potentially fourth, if you include the backfield option. Just in my opinion.
See, I think there's enough passing volume to go around because I think the defense is, I don't want to say deteriorated, but just definitely not as good as they were perceived to be the first 10 weeks of last year. I think they're more what we saw the rest of the season, which will just inherently cause Dak to throw more. Now, obviously, we'll see how that ends up playing itself out, but I would think that the wide receiver too, even if it is the third option and that is Brendan Cooks, would have a lot. Like, that's a flyer that I like to take. I mentioned he's going pick number 155. Like, if he sucks, you can cut him. That's fine.
That's I don't have a problem with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but just to take a look at my projections right now, I have 8 tight ends within 12 spots of each other in terms of within 12 fantasy points of each other. So it's McBride, Ferguson, Ingram, Andrews, Kincaid, Kittle, Pitts, Njoku, and then Goddard. So there's 9 guys, all a part of that tier. Just give me the guys going the latest, and Jake Ferguson's the one going the latest. And he could spike touchdowns if Zeke or Dwaddle can't get any, if they both turn into Tony Pollard on the goal line.
And how big was your gap in that? I'm curious because I was pulling up mine.
Gap, there was a 12-point gap. So Trey McBride, 149 half-point PPR points, down to Dallas Goedert, 132 PPR points, or half-point PPR points.
Okay. It's funny that Dallas Goedert ends the tier for me at 133, but just for comparison's sake, Trey McBride's on a whole nother tier for me because I actually have him up near 170. But the other names, including Kittle, is where Ferguson is sitting for me in that tier.
Yeah, and I have Ferguson just slightly behind McBride at 146. So I think that he's a really good value right now.
You have Ferguson for 146?
Yeah.
I have from 145.9.
But that turns out to be number tight end 4 for me overall.
Oh, see that I have him tight end 9. So it just comes down to like slightly differences of their names.
Zeke or Dwaddle?
Dwaddle.
Man,
I'm still taking Zeke.
Zeke looked pretty not washed last year.
I don't think he is completely washed. I think he's not the Zeke we knew at his peak. Obviously not, especially the workload at this point. But he had games where he's fine. That was about as bad of a situation you could put any running back in with those Patriots. So I think he's still got enough left. They brought him back. I don't know if that was, it's like the chicken and the egg, was like it brought him back because it's like we don't want to spend at running back and we know him and we know what he can do. Or if it's like, like we kind of see how things play out and Zeke has nowhere left to go, we'll bring back Zeke. I'm taking him because he's not costing even close to RB2, at least the last time I checked.
No.
But I will also take...
Not even close. He's going at the same pick as Blake Corb. He's going at pick number 110.
Okay, Zeke all day long. But I was going to say, I don't mind the flyer on Dowdle either. I know there's been some talk of who like the backup should be. I think it's Dowdle. Like if they brought in Pirine or something like that, again, I go back to the Broncos guys potentially being cut. I don't think they're sold like, oh, Dowdle's definitively our guy. But Dowdle looked good at times, decent in the passing game, caught a few touchdowns. But yeah, Zeke's not washed. I'm taking that's absurd that he's going down there by backups. And I'm going to have too much Zeke. I'm going to hate it.
Yeah, it's going to be terrible. Like Rico's going at pick number 136. That's the same as Ty Chandler and Chuba Hubbard and Kendry Miller and Jalen Wright. Like you can almost just draft both of them and see what happens. And maybe you'll find yourself a very playable running back too throughout the course of the year.
Yeah, I would take, and I know you're not going to agree with one of them, but I would take Zeke over both Steelers running backs.
Obviously I like Warren significantly better,
But see, I think we have the clear Zeke is the guy. We know his touches. I will agree. Warren has the higher upside because if Warren became the guy, I just don't believe that that's going to happen with Arthur Smith in an offense as we talked about on that show. But I have Zeke in front of it. I have Zeke in the tier with names like Pollard, his former teammate, Brian Robinson, Zach Moss. He's in the tier with Warren and Eckler and Mostert. I think that's where he deserves to be.
Passion, drive, patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Supercharger, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want. It's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only, exclusions apply. Everyone who tunes into the Pat Mayo Experience knows from time to time I like to talk to you about some health supplements that I end up taking, and I've been doing Timeline's MitoPure now for about a month. Feel great, and I think you can too. Take 2 soft gels a day for 2 months, and you can see significant improvements in your cellular energy, your muscle strength, and your endurance. That was the big thing. I've been golfing more this summer and lifting less. Yet when I go back to the gym for my once a week, like max lift, I am not really atrophying that much. I'm not losing a ton of muscle, which is absolutely fantastic news for me and my golf game, because if you work out too much, then you get too sore, you get too stiff, you need to retain that flexibility. I'm retaining my muscle mass at the same time, although I'm not working out as much. And it comes in 2 product designs to fit your needs. They're berry powder, which is great to mix into your breakfast, yogurt, or daily smoothie. That's how I've been doing it. I've been eating some strawberries, raspberries, blackberries with a little bit of yogurt, a little bit of protein powder, then boom, Timeline's MitoPure right on top of that. Or they have soft gels for the days where you're just on the run and wanted something to convenient to grab and go. So, Timeline is offering 10% off your first order of MitoPure right now. So go to timeline.com/mayo to get that 10% off. All right? Let's move to the Capitol. The Washington Commandos are 8-1 to win the NFC East. Their win total is, I had it, now I don't have it, 6.5, which is being bet to the over. So people think they're going to be slightly better than 6.5 wins. The player I have drafted the most so far this season is Jaden Daniels.
Love it. 100% love it. You heard me grimace with that, as I don't love the 6.5. We're talking about a rookie quarterback just in general. And can be another non-mutually exclusive thing is that we can love Jaden Daniels, especially for fantasy, and what he can do for this team. You're also talking about a team that won 4 games last year and a rookie quarterback who generally doesn't hit this win total in general, just because a lot of times it's the roster construction. Defense, still not that good, like mid-pack, hopefully, at best, I would say. So, again, pointing to the offense, but Jaden Daniels, I've mentioned this before when we talked rookies, when we talk quarterbacks in general, he has Lamar Jackson rushing upside. Does he get there? Does he get 1,000+ yards? No, but that is within his ability. I think he's probably going to be more of like a 700, 800 guy. But 700 or 800, I go back to Daniel Jones. 700 yards, 7 rushing touchdowns. The dude didn't even throw for 3,500 yards. I think it was 32. Didn't even throw a touchdown per game. And Daniel Jones was like QB 9 or 10 that year. It takes nothing in the passing game if you're running that much. And now you talk about Jaden Daniels, who a lot of people wanted to compare to Justin Fields, which I don't think is fair because he's the best of Justin Fields. Like, he has a better deep ball, and he makes much better decisions with much better placement. Like, the good games you saw from Justin Fields, that's Jaden Daniels. Now, of course, he could be a bust as a rookie. He could be a bust in the NFL. Wouldn't be the first. But that upside, and especially with the rushing game, I have Jaden Daniels. My projections love Jaden Daniels more than I do. And maybe I should listen to him, Pat, because you remember way back when, the one year that my projections said Lamar Jackson was number 1, and I'm like, chill out projections. I'm going to pull you back about 2 or 3 spots. And he finishes number 1 that year. And I'm not saying to be like, look at my projections. But sometimes they kind of check yourself. My projections have Jaden Daniels as QB6.
I might have him as QB8. He's on the same tier as Stroud, Burrow, Anthony Richardson, Dak, Kyler, like that tier of guy. And when you take a look at his ADP for season-long leagues, he's being drafted after Jordan Love and Caleb Williams and Brock Purdy. He's picked number 107. Like, if you play in a 1-quarterback league and you don't want to bite the bullet and spend value on a quarterback, just draft Jaden Daniels. See if he's good. If he's not good, pick up Matt Stafford. Pick up Aaron Rodgers. It doesn't really matter, but this is a guy who could be same thing that we talked about with Jalen Hurts. When you have these rushing upside type players, just take the flyer on them because they could be QB1 out of nowhere. Like, there's no path for Trevor Lawrence to be QB1 or Aaron Rodgers. There is for Jaden Daniels.
100%. His numbers and my projections are very similar to Anthony Richardson. The biggest difference is I actually have Jaden Daniels throwing for 300 more yards, equal touchdowns, 21 to 21. but more rushing touchdowns for Anthony Richardson. That's the one thing I don't know if Jaden Daniels will be as right. To go back to the conversation we had on another show, or actually, no, it was this show earlier with Jalen Hurts, and the whole conversation with Anthony Richardson versus Jonathan Taylor and all that type of stuff. This is another step further where I don't think that Jaden Daniels runs as much at the goal line, and smartly so. And then you look at Brian Robinson and Eckler in this backfield. I don't think they need him to either, but I have him for 700 rushing yards, 700 rushing yards and 6 rushing touchdowns. The upside, again, that might be low. It might. Some people will be like, "You're insane. He's not running the ball 120 times." I disagree, and I think there is what you just said. The path to being number one. Does it happen as a rookie? Almost guaranteed not. But if you ran 140, 150 times like Lamar Jackson, it might be in play.
Or just got touchdown luck that all of a sudden he just rushes for 10 touchdowns, which if you're running that much, we saw like a Lamar type season like that where he just made a few guys miss and he was rushing in 30-yard, like from 30 yards out. It wasn't all tush push type stuff. He makes Fields is exactly the same way. Like make a guy miss at midfield and he's just gone.
And that was the thing with Justin Fields still in points per game. Even sucking was like, what, QB7?
Yeah, and that's the whole thing. Like he can be bad and still be great at fantasy. That's why I think that people they've come more to that realization over the years, but it's still hard to make that pick when you do it. And listen, if he sucks, again, it didn't cost you anything. It was a 10th round pick. Who cares?
Justin Fields was QB5 2 years ago, throwing 2,200 yards and 17 touchdowns. 2,200 yards and 17 touchdowns, and he was QB5 in points per game at 19.9.
McLaurin is pick number 67 overall. That's one spot ahead of Christian Kirk. I actually like Christian Kirk better. Your boy, Jahan Dotson, is 153. That's in the Brendan Cooks range. And like Michael Wilson, and that's kind of it. Luke McCaffrey's going at 228. But those are the 3 options in the receiving for the wide receiving core that we're seeing right now. Do you like any of those guys?
I like Dotson. I'm going to go back in on him. I like Sam Howell, forgot he existed for half games at a time for whatever reason, would target him 5 times in the first half and then never again for the rest of the game. Some of it was Ron Rivera. I mean, you remember that. We were at I forget the end of one game with the game on the line, and McLaurin and Dotson weren't even on the field. He was running out like Diami Brown, and I forget who was out there with them. And Twitter was going crazy. Like, what the hell is happening right now? And I think it was Byron Pringle or something.
Oh,
it made no sense.
The heir to the chip fortune. It was actually probably Curtis Samuel if his hamstring was like up to the task.
I don't even know if he was out there at this point. But anyway, you look at this roster, and Luke McCaffrey could be a fine slot receiver, but I don't even know if he's ready to be a slot receiver as a rookie. If Dotson can't do it with Jaden Daniels and the roster behind him, I mean, you brought up McCaffrey, Diami Brown, I just pulled it up. Zacchaeus is now on this team. Jameson Crowder's back. I don't even know if he makes the opening day roster. Pringle's, I don't even know if he's still there. He doesn't even have a number. And then Mitchell Tinsley and Rosemary Jack Saint is a flyer that they got super late. Like, if Dotson can't be the 2 and can't put up wide receiver 3 numbers, he's done. Just write his career off. But I put it here and I say Jaden Daniels throws the ball 500, 550 times, even in a conservative season. Let's just call it 500. You have Zach Ertz, who's, as we saw, pretty much done, washed, and a rookie tight end in Ben Sinnott. Even if they were the number 2 options, it's still you have to have somebody else. So I'm backing on Dotson. And the best part about it, you brought up the ADP. Last year, he cost you a 7th, 8th round because everybody was in on Dotson. Now he's essentially free. Like 100% I'm going to go back in on him for free.
Yeah, he will be undrafted in most leagues. You mentioned the tight ends because Ertz is there now too. They have the rookie. Do you care about any of these guys?
I don't know. If you told me Zach Ertz was done, like didn't even play this season, maybe mild interest in Sinnott that he could do like a Luke Musgrave type of year, but I don't think it's going to be anything. It's not going to be Laporta type of year. I think Sinnott, a little bit of rawness that he's probably not going to be on the field all the time. So I think he'd probably, best case scenario, 600, 5 touchdowns, somewhere around there.
Let's get to your former team, the New York Giants. They don't project to be very good. Although I do have faith that Brian Daboll can just cobble together like a decent offense based on just give him the materials. He'll make it better than whatever the materials are when you have the summation of the entire thing. But they are 18-1 to win the AFC East, and their win total is 6.5, same as Washington.
Under.
Crazily enough. Yeah, to bet the under is -135. People are betting the under on this one. Is there anyone that you would actually want from this team on a fantasy roster? Because the only one who's like being drafted right now as a contributor, you have Malik Neighbors. I haven't projected as wide receiver number 34. That still might be pretty high. Then you have Devin Singletary. I have projected running back number 32, who, if he just stays the starter and gets 20 touches a game, is going to have value. It's just not going to be a lot of value.
So I have Neighbors at 27, slightly higher, but I would actually take him after some of the names directly behind him, just in projections. A lot of that is having over 130 targets heading in his direction, because who else are they going to throw to? But it's still not going to be, it's still Daniel Jones, and if they don't go to Daniel Jones at some point, it's going to be Drew Lock, which actually could be good for Neighbors, because what do we know about Drew Lock? He's going to love chucking it deep, and that should be good. But it's funny, I'm one spot different than you are on Singletary, and that's why I've actually ended up with a bit of Singletary. It's not like I'm excited to get him, but as an RB3, because you're not drafting him as a starter, you don't have to, and 31 isn't technically a starter, but a few things break wrong for the guys in front of him. People get hurt, and he just stays healthy. The one thing is you do have Sheen, and I know he's the GM, so he has nothing to do with actual stuff on the field like Jerry Jones tries to do, but you do have Sheen and Brian Daboll, who had Singletary in Buffalo, and there was the whole conversation when Daboll was there of like, is Daboll the one that wants him to be the bell cow, or is he wants him to be the timeshare? The way this roster, this depth chart at running back is constructed, and it wasn't a huge contract, but it kind of suggests that Singletary might be the guy, especially when you're looking at Jashawn Corbin and Eric Gray, and just the guys behind him are just a bunch of like, maybe they have an NFL career as a backup, as a timeshare piece. I think Singletary could be a decent workload, but the problem is he plays for the Giants, and that's why he's not a top 20 running back. If you put him with this workload that I expect, back on the Bills, even with Josh Allen stealing touchdowns, I actually would consider him a top 20 running back.
So he's being drafted as running back number 32 right now. That is one spot behind Nick Chubb, one spot ahead of Austin Eckler. But that's the problem, is the other guys at the other positions going around him. Like this is, Jalen Warren is also in here, but you get Rashee Rice, Xavier Worthy, Deontay Johnson, Jake Ferguson, DeAndre Hopkins. I kind of like all those guys.
I'm with you. And that's actually why, as much as I think Singletary is a decent value, I haven't ended up with a lot of them because I'm drafting those guys at that spot. So I would need Singletary to fall another round, which it might happen because people might come around and say, yeah, why aren't we drafting these players? I love the Deontay Johnson value there. But and then to go back to your original question too, is after Neighbors and Singletary, if he makes it another round, gets out of those names into like that next tier, no, I really don't, because I know Darius Slayton's actually led the team in receiving. I think 5 of the last 6 years or something ridiculous, or 4 of the last 5, something ridiculous like that, because they have nobody else. But he might get usurped by Jalen Hyatt in his second season. Wan'Dale Robinson's just going to be Wan'Dale Robinson, but he's going to take his 70, 80 some on targets away. And then Bellinger / Theo Johnson at tight end are going to take away 100 targets probably combined. It's just going to be too spread out after Neighbors and Singletary and across this entire team, whether it is Daniel Jones or Drew Lock.
Remember the great Isaiah Hodgins run of 3 years ago?
Oh my God. I left them off our projections, and there was somebody that actually, you don't even have Isaiah Hodgins. I'm like, really?
This is where you've chosen to die? On Isaiah Hodgins in 2024.
This is where you want to come at me? Don't come at me for Cam Akers or Jahan Dotson. Come at me for Isaiah Hodgins.
I totally spaced on it when we were talking about Washington. Brian Robinson versus Eckler. Do you have a take either way?
Brian Robinson.
They're going around the same.
And I will take Robinson because I think he's a better pass catcher than people realize. Although I will take both. That was actually the conversation I had with Meany, is that because of where they're going, it's a more appealing version of the Steelers for me, and I know you and some other people are probably disagreeing with that, especially with Warren, but we've seen Eckler finish as a top 3 running. He was the number 2 running back off the draft board last year because of what he had done year in, year out. I don't think the Commanders brought him in to be that Eckler, but I have him for about 100 rushing attempts, a decent usage in the passing game. I don't think Daniels is going to check down a ton. But I do think that Brian Robinson is good enough to also stay out there on third down, where I can see this being not the Eckler we used to know, as in more of a 55% Robinson, 40% Eckler, and somebody else gets that little change left over, which is fine for where they're going because that's kind of all you're paying. And if one of the two gets to 60, 65%, then either one of them could be a value. Straight up, I would take Robinson over Eckler, but I'm also willing to take both.
Do you think that Cliff Kingsbury being their OC would lean you towards more of a pass catching back? Like, do you think that Eckler will just run routes? Like, do you think we see like two running back sets with Eckler as a receiver?
I would hope that's the case, because the one thing Kingsbury likes is he likes the reason with Kyle Murray and now with Jaden Daniels, he likes people who can extend plays, but they're not extending plays just to dump it out of somebody out of the backfield. It's extending plays to continue to look downfield and not necessarily always run. Look for somebody breaking free. Bring back the Tyler Lockett example that we always give for just always knowing where to be for Russell Wilson, is that Jaden Daniels extends plays like Kyle Murray does, and poof, all of a sudden, not even Dotson. McLaurin's popped open finally. He broke free from coverage. Even the tight end, which mean again, I go back to, it doesn't mean like he's extending the play and then, he looks over and Austin Eckler's still sitting over there. I think it'd be more of a route situation. The interesting thing too, to go back to that whole conversation I brought up for you with the Eagles about pre-snap motion, Kingsbury was actually one of the worst in the NFL. So I'm kind of hoping, but again, he puts a lot on the quarterback extending plays, but I'm kind of hoping sitting back and watching in that wonderful shot we remember from the draft day, I kind of hope that he learned a little bit and does a little bit more pre-snap motion, especially with what he has on this team. And maybe even Eckler, sending him in motion than out of the slot.
I just think I would much rather have Eckler for at least the perception of the upside that I have in my head, that if he can get himself back to, we talked about if Dotson's not the number 2, it's going to be McLaurin and who? Maybe it's just Eckler with 100 targets and 90 catches.
That's fair, but I think you would be changing the offense of what Daniels kind of does.
Sure.
But it's fair. I'm just saying it's fair, though.
All right. That's the NFC East. It's not weirdly, it's one of those divisions that, people will watch this show more than others because it has very name popular teams. I just don't find it to be that intriguing of a division. Like, the Eagles are going to be good. I think the Cowboys will be all right, and everyone else sucks.
It would do it. I would take the Commanders for more wins than the Giants. I actually got a report from somebody at Giants training camp. I won't name names just because I don't want people to come for them. But the text said, this team isn't winning 4 games. They are awful.
But again, I do think that Daboll is a good coach, and I think that he'll get more out of this team. He got them to the playoffs 2 years ago, and they were terrible. They won a playoff game.
I could see Daboll going the Patricia route on offense. I could see Daboll losing the job and then going back to offensive coordinator. I could see that happening.
You're just going
not necessarily with the Giants.
Going back to Buffalo.
Maybe. I could see him. You're over your head a little bit in the head coaching. You're just better as an offensive mind. I could see that happening. Kingsbury.
For sure, because it does seem like there's a lot of tension between Daboll and the front office.
And people on the sideline, dude screams. I'm surprised his head hasn't popped. It looks like a giant zit sometimes. That dude screams.
All right. TheAthletic.com is where you can find all of your work at All-In Kid on X. What do you have coming out in August? Besides updates, do you have any fresh new takes on things, or do you have most of the takes?
Fresh new takes
with Jake Seeley.
Yeah, and that's my new segment. There's actually 3 things that are coming out that I come out with in August. Is last year's trash. Jahan Dotson, surprise, got to be on the list. So is Austin Eckler. Honestly, last year's trash. I look at the players that really disappointed and whether you buy back into them one more chance this year. I have that coming out. I have the difference in my projections versus the actual ADP. Kind of looking. I do projections versus my own ranks, but also kind of looking at ADP where that differentiates. And then towards the end of August, we get basically the biggest camp winners, which is usually a very short list, especially now with only 2.5 preseason games, if you want to even call it that.
That will do it on the Pat Mayo Experience. You want all the division previews? Hit the description, hit the comment section, or just subscribe to Mayo Media Network on YouTube. If you want the audio podcast, Spotify, Apple, all those links down in the description as well. Smash like while you're here. Tell some friends about the Pat Mayo Experience, but really tell some friends about Underdog Fantasy. You can use code Mayo right now at Underdog Fantasy to get yourself a deposit bonus of up to $250. And then you can use Run the Sims to run those simulations, run your own projections completely free, and try to cash in bigly. All right? I'm Pat Mayo. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.
Pat Mayo Experience! Experience!